Hello, everybody. Welcome to YouTube Model Builders Tuesday night presentation. Tonight we have the great pleasure of having Chris Heli from MRL Trains. He's going to be discussing JMRI with everybody some more tonight. I don't think we get enough out of the JMRI, but you know, the more people we got that's more familiar with it, the better we off are. But anyways, I'm Dude Leonard from Crooked Fingers Railroad, and we really got a lot of stuff going on in our YouTube Model Builders team. We've got the EMAG that's bi-monthly. Every 2 months the EMAG comes out. You can go to the YouTubeModelBuilders.com, sign up for an emailed link to that. You can download it, and there's a lot of good information in there. Plus our Tuesday night hangouts. Every Tuesday night we got 4 different
Anybody else lose them?
Yeah, he just dropped out.
Okay. All right, so it looks like he lost his connection, so I'll just take over from here.
Your static voice is back again, Chris.
All right, let me try to change it.
Someone's going to need to get out. So
okay, make sure everybody make sure you're muted. Yeah. Okay, so when Dude gets back, I'll let him finish his intro, but in the meantime, I'll talk a little about what I'm going to be doing tonight. Tonight, basically, we're talking about speed matching, and then later on how to use GMRI to help you do that. So first thing I'm going to do is kind of give you a quick overview about speed matching.
Your mic's still messed up there, Chris.
Okay. It's like the Google Hangout God's not with us tonight. There you go. Testing 1, 2, 3. How's that?
Scott, we need you to drop out so Dude can get in to do the presentation. He got kicked by accident.
Will do.
Right, thanks.
Yes,
So anyways,
yes, Dave's got. I'll drop. Oh, too late.
how's my mic now? Any better?
sound better. Yeah, you sound better.
Okay. Okay. So basically, I'm gonna, talk about all different methods of speed matching, from the simplest to fairly complex, and maybe debunk a few myths that are out there about speed matching, and then we're going to talk about, get a little deep into theory on the CV. I want to keep this simple tonight because I know a lot of you guys are more interested in learning than learning advanced.
Sorry about that. Had a little problem. I don't know if you guys noticed that I completely dropped out. I don't know what the heck happened there.
Yeah, things were all kind of funky for a minute, but we kept it going. So if you want to finish your intro, then I'll pick up where I left off.
No, I think I'm good for now. I'll go ahead and just do the intermission one, and we'll just go from there. So anyways, without further ado, go ahead and I'll give it over to Chris.
Okay, thanks, Dude. So, after we talk about some of the goals of speed matching and the different methods, then I am going to get into understanding the CVs that control your speeds, because that's really the most important and probably the most difficult part about speed matching. But once you understand that, the rest is easy. So I'll try and keep everything light and simple, but when we get to the CVs, it might get a little complicated. But then we'll get out and I'll show you Decoder Pro and how I use that to make it a whole lot simpler. And then I'll show you my method, as opposed to all the different methods that are out there. I kind of developed my own method. It works really good for me, and I'll share it with you guys. So without any, as Dude would say, without any further ado, let's talk a little about the goals of speed matching. When it comes to speed matching, there's basically 3 different trains of thought, so to speak. There's what I call fleet matching, which is where you'd want to match every one of your locomotives all the same. So your entire fleet is matched to the same setting that any locomotive can run with any locomotive. Then there's what I call class matching. You might have different classes of locomotives like yard switchers, freight locomotives, or passenger locomotives that maybe run at different speeds. So you don't want your yard switcher to be able to necessarily run the same as a passenger train, because it's never going to run that fast. And by lowering the top end, you can get a lot finer control for switching in a yard, whereas a passenger train you might want to run much faster, have a higher top end. And the freight is somewhere in the middle between the two, so that's kind of match it by class, so to speak. And then the third type is kind of just what I call consist matching. You might have a ABA set of F7s that are always going to run together. You don't care if they run with any other locomotives in your fleet. You just want to make sure those 3 are matched together. Then you might have another pair of locomotives that's always going to run together. And as long as they run okay together, who cares if they run with the rest of your fleet? So that's where you just kind of make little sets and just match them to each other. So that's what I call class or consist matching. It's just kind of matched to its own little consist. Let's see here. You guys see me okay? I got a...
Yes.
Okay, a little
Yeah,
something
no
popped
problem.
up here, and I wanted to make sure it was still working. So, okay, so once you decide how if you're gonna do fleet matching or class matching or consist matching, the first thing you really need to do is decide on what the highest speed is going to be, and that's going to be limited by basically your slowest locomotive. If you have an Athearn Blue Box and you have say a Proto 2000 and a Athearn Genesis, run them all at top speed, and whichever one runs the slowest is going to be the fastest you can program any of your locomotives to run. That's where you're going to want to set your top end, there or lower. So I always pick what I call my golden locomotive. That's the one locomotive that you're going to match everything to, because I'm going to speak basically in terms of fleet matching tonight, because that's what I do. I match every locomotive I have to run together. So pretty much all night tonight we'll be discussing fleet matching, but everything I talk about applies to the other methods too. So, I always pick what I call my golden locomotive. It's the one locomotive that everything else matches to. And the reason you want to do that is if you have, let's say, 5 locomotives, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Well, I match number 2 to number 1. And then I match number 3 to number 2, and then I match number 4 to number 3. Well, they're always going to be off a little bit, and every time you match, let's say I'm off by 5% when I match one to the other, then I match the next one and it's off another 5%. By the time you get to number 5 and you try and run it with number 1, it could be off by like 25%. So by always matching all the rest of them to one single locomotive, they're all going to be really close to the same. You won't compound the error, because you'll never get them to run perfectly together. That's kind of a myth. You can get them to run really good together, but never perfect. So by always matching to your one golden locomotive, they'll always all run pretty good together. You won't keep compounding your error. So there's a couple myths that are out there. I mean, I learned about speed matching by reading all I could on the internet and then experimenting and trying and seeing what I liked and what worked for me. But You know, one of the biggest myths out there is that, you know, there's only one or two ways to speed match. The other ones are wrong. Well, I found that to be totally false. There's 20 different ways you could speed match, and they're all right. It all depends on your situation. You know, are you fleet matching? Are you consist matching? Are you class matching? You know, everybody's got a little different situation. You have a small layout and you're only going to run slow and 2 locomotives at a time. If you have a large layout and you're going to run 7 or 8 locomotives in a consist, so, you know, there's so many variables that there is no one single right way to speed match. So as you listen tonight, think about how you plan on running your layout, and then pick out the things that apply to you, and maybe just jot them down on with a pencil and paper if you have it. And, you know, you'll be able to apply just about everything I learned to or teach you tonight to whatever method you're gonna use. So one of the other really big myths out there is that you can't use back EMF when you're consisting. For those of you that are not sure what back EMF is, it's kind of a cruise control, for lack of a better term, for your locomotives. If you set it at a speed, it always runs that same speed. If the cars start dragging it down and trying to make it slow down, it automatically applies more power, so that that motor is always turning the same number of revolutions. So same token, you know, if I grab a locomotive as it's going, you can just feel it applying more and more power, trying to maintain its speed. And same token, if I try and push it to go faster, it'll actually turn down the power so that it doesn't accelerate. So it's kind of like a cruise control for your car. But there's guys that swear you can't use back EMF when you're consisting. Well, I've found that just to be the opposite. I actually prefer to use it. So we'll get to more of that later. So the whole point being, there's a lot of myths out there. I suggest when you go out there and search the internet for speed matching methods, take the best of all of it and marry it together, and take everything with a grain of salt. You know, the more people insist you can't do something, the more they probably don't know what they're talking about. So the guys that are out there telling you what you can do are the guys that probably know what they're talking about. Once you have your golden locomotive picked and you decide you're going to actually start doing some speed matching, there's some very simple ways to do it, but they're very time consuming, and then working your way up, there's harder and harder ways to do it. And probably the most simple way to do it is by eyeball. You literally put one locomotive in front of the other, keep adjusting the CVs until you get them to run about the same speed. And if you're going to do it that way, obviously the one that you're going to adjust to is your golden locomotive. So, you know, you'll set your golden locomotive where you want it, and then you'll take the next one and run it behind and see if it runs faster. Or if you got 2 parallel tracks, that's even better. That'd be the next step up. You can put them side by side on a parallel track, put them together in a consist with your throttle, and then just see how they run speed-wise, and keep adjusting. You know, it's the way I originally did it, and you could spend an hour or 2 trying to get a pair speed matched. It can be real picky, time-consuming, but it's cheap and easy.
Chris, have you ever ran into into a situation of where 2 locomotives will run a different speed in forward and reverse? You know, because of the what do you do with something like that? I mean, because I know that I've got a couple. I just worked myself around it. I mean, I was able to fix the situation. I couldn't tell you how I fixed it, but anyways.
You can try and fix it mechanically, because it usually has to do with binding in one direction or the other, usually the worm gears in the drive shaft. But there's also a lot of CVs nowadays have what's called reverse trim. If you buy CVs that have reverse trim as a feature, and I know NCE has it, and any of the version 3.5, which have been out for a long time. Some really old NCE version 3.2 don't have it, but Digitrax has it. Just about all of them have reverse trim nowadays. And what that allows you to do is actually, wherever you end up for your speed, excuse me, you then change, if you can add or subtract a little from one direction to the other, and it applies it uniformly across all speeds. So I can make it run like 2% slower in reverse than forward, so to speak. And we can take a look at that later on. Remind me when we have JMRI speed tables open and their speed matching. I'll try and remember to show you that feature and show you how you can use it.
Hey, Chris, Ron Klaus has a question. Do the engines need to have the same decoder to make speed matching doable?
Okay, that's a very good question, and the answer is absolutely not. In fact, the method I'm going to show you that I developed for myself, I can literally take any brand of locomotive, any model, and any decoder, and as long as those decoders support speed tables, I can pretty much get them to speed match. And the way I do it, I'll probably put the cart ahead of the horse a little bit here, but tip my hand, but I use this AccuTrack speedometer. It's a little tunnel speedometer. The train runs through there, and it trips infrared sensors on each end, and it tells you how many scale miles an hour the train is doing. And you can literally take, some of you may be familiar with this or not, but some of the older locomotives had 15-to-1 gear ratio, and some of them had 14-to-1. I think they've all pretty much standardized on 1, and I can't remember if it's 14 or 15, but people used to swear, and in DC it was true, that you couldn't speed match one to the other. But if you use the speed tables in JMRI and you use a speedometer like that, you can basically match any brand of locomotive with any brand decoder. In fact, that's what I'm going to show you tonight. I have 3 different locomotives, 3 different brands, and each one has a different brand decoder in it. And I'll show you that they can actually be set to run together quite well. So, yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. Where was I? Oh yeah, once you start to actually speed match, you can try and do it by eye. It's real slow and painful, time consuming, but it can be done. The next best way is to actually use a way to measure time and distance. If you don't have a speedometer, the next best thing you can do is measure out, say, 3 feet of track, and then you take a stopwatch, and there's tables out there. I don't have one in front of you, but it tells you if it takes 10 seconds to run from one end of the mark to the other end of the mark 3 feet away, then you're going, say, 15 miles an hour. So there's actually charts out there that show you a certain distance and how long it takes to cover that distance, so how many scale miles an hour that would be. So that's another way you can do it, using a stopwatch and a measured distance. That's more accurate, but probably not any quicker than trying to eyeball it. After that, the next best thing is getting into using speedometers, like the one I just showed you. And then there's also speedometers where you can set like infrared detectors in your track. And when it crosses one detector, then crosses the other, it does the same thing. It's measuring time and distance and doing that same calculation you would using a table. But generally it requires some software to go with it. And JMRI actually has that ability built into it. If you open your copy of JMRI, you'll see there's a thing called speedometer in there. But it depends on you installing some sensors in your track to tell you when it crosses the sensor once and then the second time. So that's another option, but I don't like the idea of putting your speedometer only in one place, hard installing it into your layout, because you can never move it around. I can take this tunnel speedometer here, and I take it to my friend's house and speed match your locomotives there. I can take it to a clinic and do a clinic, at some remote location. I can put it anywhere on my layout I feel like putting it, and I tell guys it's the best $65 I've spent in model railroading. There's no doubt about it. So, because consisting is something that's always been a real interest to me. Ever since I got into DCC, I like running multi-unit lash-ups, and the German in me makes me really want to do it to find precision. So I enjoy doing it. I've spent hours and hours and hours over the last 10 or 15 years, and I still enjoy doing it. So So once you pick your method we picked our how we're going to match them, our golden locomotive. We've decided that what method we're going to use to actually speed match them, being measuring it, eyeballing it, using a speedometer. The next thing you really have to do is pick your top speed. I think I mentioned that earlier, but that's where I start when I do my speed matching. Is I have a set speed, 56 miles an hour on my speedometer, that I set all my locomotives to. And depending on what kind of layout, do you have a logging layout with a bunch of shays, or do you have a steam era with big passenger trains or slower freight trains? You pick a speed that you think is appropriate for your era and your layout, and then make sure, of course, like I said, that all your locomotives are capable of going that speed at full power. And most of the time they will, because I've never seen a locomotive that runs too slow out of the box. They almost all run too fast, Lionel style, and you end up slowing them down anyway. So once you pick your top speed, then you have to determine your bottom speed. And I've found that about 3 miles an hour on my speedometer is about as slow of a slow speed as you can go across your fleet. I have locomotives that will literally go a half a mile an hour. You get a nice Cotto or something with a nice can motor, and you've done a little work to it so that it's lubricated well and wheels are clean, and some of those will run like literally a half mile an hour. But if you have Athearn blue boxes in the mix, or some of the older Proto 2000s, probably the slowest you're going to get those to run is in the 2.5 to 3 mile an hour range. So most of them will go as slow as 1.5 to 2, especially the newer locomotives. But let's say if you start having Athearn blue boxes or older Protos, and there's other brands that I don't even own, so I couldn't speak to them, but I've picked 3 miles an hour as being my speed step, the first step when they start to move. So if I wasn't consisting, I could turn them down to run slower, but because I consist and I want them all to move together at the same time, then that's been a speed that works really well. So that's kind of the things you need to know before you start. As far as kind of your givens and druthers, you've heard of that term applied to layouts. You got to have kind of your givens and druthers for speed matching too before you start. But before we get into actually doing one, I want to get to the more complicated part. And maybe it's not. If you guys understand CVs and have done any programming, it's not that complicated. You just have to understand how your command station and your decoder are talking to each other, and what the speed tables do for it. Once you understand that, it's really pretty simple. So I'm going to switch my screen now to Decoder Pro. Do a little screen sharing here in a second. Okay, so how many of you guys are familiar with this? The reason I brought this up is because it's a good example to help visualize what I'm going to try and tell you. So actually, I'm going to do a little changing in here before we start. Just remind me at the end not to save this because I'm overwriting one of my saved models. But, okay, can you guys see this speed table okay?
Yes.
Sure do.
Okay, perfect. So when it comes to CVs and the decoders, there's actually a couple different ways to adjust the speed on your locomotive. Most of you guys are probably familiar with CV number 2, number 5, and number 6. CV number 2 is your start voltage. That's the one you adjust to determine, or you adjust to make your locomotive run, let's say on speed step 1. How slow do you want it to run? You have to keep increasing the voltage till that motor starts to move and that locomotive will move by itself. That's basically equivalent of speed step 1. So that's CV number 2. That's your start voltage. CV number 5 is actually your top end voltage. So that's if you have it set all the way to 255 as your CV setting, it's going to be applying full voltage at speed step 28, basically. But I shouldn't even throw that in there and confuse you. But in fact, I'm going to change pages here for a second. Basic speed control page. No, this was a bad example because that one has a tsunami hearing. All right, forget I said that. So CV number 6, the third one, it sets your mid voltage. So this is what I call a 3-point speed matching. You have your start voltage, your top voltage, so that determines how slow, how fast. Then you get CV number 6 determines your mid voltage. In other words, halfway between the start and the slowest and the fastest. So if you equate this in simple terms, let's say CV number 2 was, let's say we had 10 speed steps altogether. CV number 1 through 10. Or, yeah, hang on a second. Let me not confuse
Chris,
you.
should you be showing another screen because we still see the same speed table?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm going to back out of this one and bring one. I tried to look at that other screen and it didn't have the right definition on it, so I couldn't show you what I wanted to. Let me pick a different. What you're seeing now is my roster. These are all my different locomotives and the different decoders. So if I pick this one with an NCE decoder, that'll have what I wanted to show.
Your roster's about like mine. Got to start using the bar to go down.
Yeah. So here's our speed table again, and here's the basic speed control. So you see this V start, V mid, and V high. Those are CVs 2, 6, and 5. So if I set the first one to where the locomotive just barely moves, I set the top one to full speed, and I set the mid to halfway, you should have a straight line. And I'm going to go back to the speed table and just give you an example of this. Can you see where my mouse is right now?
Yep.
That's halfway. That's the number 14 speed step out of 26. That would be
okay.
That would be the equivalent of your mid speed step. So by setting this, by setting it halfway, you'll have a perfectly straight line from the lowest to the highest. But what you can do if you really want to is kind of tweak that so that maybe it runs a lot slower for the first half of your throttle, and on the second half of your throttle, then it takes off much faster. I don't recommend doing that. I always try and keep a nice, straight, linear line so that you have a predictable response. But I'm kind of getting more complicated than I want to, and you guys are probably, hopefully, not getting too confused, but I don't want to bore you to death and put you to sleep either, so I just wanted to point out that the one way you can do it is just using these 3 CVs. That's how it used to be before the speed tables came around. But instead of using those 3 CVs, you can use a speed table. There's 28 other CVs. For those that want to know, there's CVs 67 through 94, I do believe. But what it is it's 28 increments. And you can see all 28 of them on my screen here. A lot of you guys have probably seen on your throttles where it says 28 or 128 speed steps, like an NCE, and I think other systems may do that too. That 128 steps is really just an interpretation. There's actually only 28 CVs that can be programmed, and that's what these sliders represent. So here's a little tool tip for you when you're using this. You see me putting these check marks down at the bottom? right now, there's none of these little boxes are checked. There's a box under each of your 28 sliders. If there's no boxes checked, then you grab a slider. If you move down, it'll pull all of them down with it once it gets down to their level, because the decoder does not allow you to set a higher speed step slower than one that's before it. Like if I pull this one up, it makes sure it pulls all the ones to the right of it with it, because those are higher speed steps. It won't let you go slower in speed step 28 than you have it set to run in, say, speed step 26. So I can move this one down by itself, and you notice, and once I get so far, it pulls the rest of them down with it. That's because of that rule. You're not allowed to set a higher speed step to run slower than a speed step before it. So on the left side is speed step 1, and that's your slowest, and speed step 28 is your highest. So you can't violate that rule. It doesn't let you. I can pull this one up and down all I want, but if I take number 27 next to it, it's going to take number 28 with it. So as you're playing around, you'll find out, oh crap, I'm moving this and I didn't want to. My little secret is you put a checkbox in the first one and the last one. So over here I put a check in that checkbox, and I put a check in that checkbox, and we pull this down. Now watch what happens. When I move this up, it brings them all up, but it keeps them in a perfectly straight line going back to the left. So as I pull this up and down, it always gives me a nice, just like you'd want your locomotive to accelerate. That's what this graph is really representing. The top end of this graph represents how fast, the bottom end represents how slow. And if you picture this as being your gas pedal in your car has 28 notches in it, you know, when you first step on the gas from the stoplight, you get notch number 1, then you get notch number 2, then you get notch number 3, and obviously you want each one to go a little faster than the one before it. So that's what we're trying to accomplish setting these sliders.
Now, Chris,
If that makes sense to you. Yeah.
on the very first one there, now is that right there for the actual start voltage on there?
Yeah, I don't know if it's coming across, but if you look on the top of these sliders, you see there's a number. I don't know if you can read that.
Yep, sure can.
Okay, so those numbers represent the value of the CV that it would program at if I told it to program right now. See, as I'm moving these, I'm not actually programming at the moment until I tell it to. But if I grab, see, speed step 1 says 7 right now. If I pull that down, now it's at 0.
Okay.
So maybe just to back up and explain one thing I meant to explain and didn't. Each one of these CVs has a minimum value of 0 and a maximum value of 255. You know, any of you guys that have programmed decoders are probably familiar with seeing that 255 as a magic number being the highest number you can program into a CV. In the case of these speed steps, what 255 represents is the maximum voltage your system is putting out. So if you're putting out 14 volts from your command station or your booster, that 255 represents 14 volts at that point. And then going down to 0, obviously it's 0 volts, but if I look at speed step 14, which is halfway, that says 122, which is basically half of 255. No, not really, but half of the 255 would basically be 7 volts. So, you know, the way DC works similar to DCC works similarly to DC, but if we just equate it in DC terms with voltage, you're getting 7 volts halfway up here, and you're getting 14 volts at the top. Now, if I bring this down, and you notice I still have my little check marks on the left and the right, so it keeps me a nice straight curve as I bring this down. If I bring this down halfway, I'm basically telling it, when you get to speed step 28, you're only applying 7 volts of the 14 volts. And sometimes that's all it takes. And you know, if you ever notice some of your locomotives, when you first take them out of the box and throw them on the layout, all of a sudden you're cranking through the speed dial and you get about halfway up and the thing is running like a rocket already, and in the first half of the throttle, and in the second half of the throttle, you know, this just doesn't go any faster. It's basically hitting full speed before you're even applying full voltage. It all depends on the motor and the decoder and other things that, you know, every locomotive is a little different. So, you know, this is the, if you can kind of understand this stuff, this is what it takes. Once you understand this, it becomes really easy to speed match. So, you know, it's a little much to learn right now at this moment as I try and tell it to you once and have you remember, but the key points to remember are 28 speed steps. The left is your slowest, the right is your highest or fastest, and this number 255 right here represents maximum voltage, and it's all just making adjustments from here is just to adjust for the differences in your locomotives and then to adjust for, like we talked about earlier, pick your top speed. You know, in my case, it's 56 miles an hour. And most of the time, I'm somewhere right around here when I'm done speed matching. I never have to apply full voltage because most of these locomotives out of the box run 70 to 80 miles an hour. I found that to be pretty consistent. It depends on the brand, but I've even had some hit 85. You know, well, they're not passenger locomotives, and they'd be from one end of my layout to the other in no time flat if I ran 85 scale miles an hour. So, and how this all relates to consisting is we need to get every one of our locomotives to run the same, and we're going to use this table on each one of them to make the adjustments to do that. So I'm going to, that's kind of my quick JMRI Decoder Pro tour that I was going to give you, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on using JMRI because that's another whole subject unto itself, but I want to show you how you can use it for speed matching. And this is basically what I do, and we're going to get right back into it as we start programming locomotives right now. So I'm going to switch out of here and put on my other camera, and we'll go to the layout now and actually put this all in action. Give me a second to get everything back and running here. Okay, are you seeing the speedometer now on the layout?
Yep.
All right. Camera adjustments a little bit here. Okay, so first thing I do, and I'll be back in 2 seconds because I forgot to put it handy right here. The first thing I do is get out a bottle of, got a little bottle of alcohol, an old contact lens cleaner, and I squirt some on the rag, and I just run it up and down the track, you know, probably for about 10 feet in each direction, because that's about how much track I use while I'm speed matching. So as you can see, the track is pretty clean. I'm not going to waste the time cleaning the whole thing, but then the next thing I would do is go ahead and do the same thing for the locomotive I'm going to speed match. And let me just get my throttle fired up here and select that locomotive. Then I just kind of go ahead and running it at full speed right now. And as you can see, again, there's really no dirt on there, so I like to keep my wheels clean, but make sure you clean your track and your wheels first, because then you'll have, sorry, I'm hitting the tripod with my chair here. You know that dirty track or dirty wheels are not going to be a factor in affecting your speed matching. I'm going to go ahead and crank this up a little and get a better view. I've got 3 locomotives out right now. Okay, set them there. Now each one of these, the Great Northern in the front is a Kato with an NCE decoder. You know, that one's, I'm going to back up one thing. One other thing you want to do is make sure you turn off all momentum. After I clean a track, the next thing I do is I make sure the momentum is turned off because you don't want to have that on. For those of you guys that know, CV3 and CV4 are your acceleration and deceleration momentum. You got to turn that off for speed matching, or that's just going to make life miserable for you. So, you know, on the NCE system here, I just go ahead and hit the momentum button, and then I hit 0. And you saw the locomotive in the background moved a little bit. It automatically set CV3 to 0 and CV4 to 0. So now I know momentum is off. It starts the second I hit it. It jumps. It doesn't, you know, take its time getting up to speed, or take its time slowing down. It responds immediately to my throttle commands. So I went ahead and did that with the other ones too. And if I just going to run these all up about even with each other. I'm going to show you how right now they're not really speed matched. So I'm going to get around here. This is how you consist with NCE for you guys that are running other systems. I'm not sure how you do it with your system. If I hit the setup button.
Your voice just went scratchy again.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I select the consist address. I put in my lead locomotive, number 3036, and it's forward. The rear locomotive, I'll make 346, which is the one way in the back. That one's also forward. And I'll add the green BN locomotive, which is number 2223. Hit enter, and that's forward. So now I have a consist built. And notice when I hit go, they're all going, but they're all going at different speeds. So if I set it at speed step 4, you'll see that this one is running quite a bit slower. The green one is actually gaining ground, taking off. You know, the BN is taking off from the MRL. So none of them right now are running the same speed. They're all actually fairly close.
Hey, Chris, you're having a problem with your mic again.
Okay, is it better now?
Say something else.
How's this now?
No, you're still getting it.
Okay, hang on. How's that now?
And it sounds like it's whenever you bumped your tripods when it started doing it.
Oh, okay, let me see if there's a wire or something on here that... Any difference now?
And it's still doing it, but not quite as bad.
How about now?
Still doing it.
One more try.
Still doing it.
No, I didn't finish yet. Change the camera and change the mic. No, change camera back. How about now?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It was good, and then all of a sudden it just.
How is it now?
That's
Any better?
good. That's a little better.
Yeah, I don't know what's causing it. I wish I could tell you. I have some better equipment in here. So I'll try and bear with this real quick. Is it unbearable, or can you tolerate it for a little bit?
What is your baud rate set on your Screen.
I've got it on the bandwidth, the maximum.
Yeah, the bandwidth.
I turn it down.
Yeah, turn it down 1 notch.
Okay, how's that? Any better?
Not really.
Picture got worse. I can see that.
Yeah.
I'm going to change mics one more time. Back to the camera.
There you go. There you go.
Got it?
Yeah,
Okay.
whatever you just did fixed it.
All right, good. Sorry about the delay, guys. All right, so what I was doing and showing you real quick is how these each are kind of running a different speed. The Montana Rail Link one in the back is set to the speeds that I like, and what we're going to do is match the BN and the Great Northern to match and run with it later. So let's bring back the speedometer. So the first one we'll match is this Burlington Northern number 2223, and turn on the speedometer and you see it says HO on there. There's actually a setting you can change it to run N scale also. So this particular model will run HO and N. I think they have a larger size model that runs for like O and S. So as you can see, that just went through at 11 miles an hour. Now, here's the method I developed for myself. On my NC throttle, right down at the bottom here, there's a button that says 28 and 128. And what it does is I can run my throttle in 28 speed steps or 128. Now I know you guys are probably saying, wait a minute, on the JMRI speed table there's only 28 steps, how can you run it 128? What it is it's the command station making an interpretation. You know, it calculates the difference and splits that it splits those 28 speed steps into 128. It gives you a little finer control, and it's all done by computations in the command station, if you will. It's just an interpretation. The CVs, there's only 28 of them you can set. So what I do is I set my throttle to run at 28 steps. I hit the little button down here, and then up on the top you can see it. Right now it says 128 in the lower right corner. If I hit it again, it changes back to 28. So now I know I'm in 28 speed step mode. So here's where the fun comes in. I can actually use my throttle to know how fast my train is going when I have it properly set. And just to demonstrate, I'm actually going to throw the Montana Rail Link on there real quick. I devised a little method for myself where if I take the speed step reading on my throttle, in this case if I'm on, dial in that locomotive once, 346, there we go. So if I'm running at speed step 4, if you double that number, that's how many miles an hour that should run. So 2 times 4 is 8. Now you're going to say, wait a minute, that only says 6.7. Because there's one other thing you should always do after you clean your wheels. Run the thing back and forth. Remember I said you need about 10 feet? I always run it back and forth at high speed real quick, 2 or 3 times, and warm it up. You'll find out that your speeds actually increase as it warms up. So notice right there it said 44 miles an hour. I had it on speed step 24. It should have been running 48 miles an hour because 2 times 24 is 48. So there we go. See the 56? Remember before I told you I set top end to 56? After running it back and forth through here just a couple of times, and Troy, to your point before with the differences, see that in reverse it was 56 and forward it was 54. That's
That was
that.
mine.
All right, yeah, I'm sorry. Dude, that's your reverse trim that we were talking about. See there, and it's consistent. Once this thing is warmed up, you'll see those numbers don't change. It's extremely consistent. 56 backwards, 54 forward. So I was just running a few times like that. So now we've got it set on speed step 8. So it should go through at 16. Pretty close. It's 15. I usually give a 1 mile an hour variance, 1 mile an hour either way. They'll still run good. So I'm going to go through at 12. It should be 24 miles an hour. And there it is. If I run through at speed step 18 or 20, that'll be 40 miles. Oop, that's a little slow. But because of that reverse trim, I bet you if I do the same thing in reverse, it'll probably say 40. And sure enough, it does. And that's the beauty of this speedometer. The thing is so accurate, and these things can be so predictable that now all I have to do is go back into JMRI, adjust the slider, and I'm set. And I know that's what it's going to run when it speeds up. See, that's 23 miles an hour forward, and it's going to be 24 miles an hour backwards. See that? So what I would need to do now, which I actually haven't done with this one yet, is go ahead and just tweak the reverse trim a little bit to get those to even out. And we'll do that in a little while. But so this is, in this case, I would call this the golden locomotive, even though it's not the one for my fleet. We'll just pretend these are the only 3 locomotives I own. I've got that one set right where I want it. Now I'm going to make these other 2 run the same to match it. So I just have to select that locomotive with my throttle. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't delete the consist, so it's not running. So delete 2223. There. Didn't want to run because it still thought it was in consist with the other one. So I got it on speed step 4, and it's running at 8.2 miles an hour. That's pretty close to where it's supposed to be, but if you remember earlier on when I talked about what's the first thing I do, I set the top end first. So I didn't clean the wheels on this because I did that previously just to save time, but normally I would have cleaned the wheels before I put it on the track. Then I run it back and forth a few times to warm it up. And this is kind of an interesting experiment because the decoder that's in this was taken from a different locomotive. I swapped them out, and that's why these 2, I picked that Great Northern and the BN because I needed to speed match them anyways because I swapped out decoders from, and I think this is kind of interesting that even though I went from an NCE decoder to a TCS decoder, right now this thing is actually running pretty close to where it should. And the caveat to that is both of those decoders were used and matched already, but in different locomotives. So it's kind of interesting. I'm just learning this same moment you guys are, that even though this came out of a previously matched speed locomotive, it's running pretty close to where it needs to. So there we go. I think that's warmed up enough. So what I'm going to do is let's bring that up to the speedometer. I should pan the camera back a little for you. And I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the share my speed matching table with you. Unfortunately, this thing is too cumbersome to keep switching back and forth. Whoa, look at that. Between seeing the locomotive and the table. So what I'm going to do is let you guys see me do the adjustments, and you'll have to trust me on what I'm reading off of the speedometer. We'll switch back later and let's just see some more of that. But first thing I'm going to do is close this window and not save it because that wasn't the no, that thing doesn't like me. close this one too. So in my table here, we need to find VN number 2223. That's right here. And I'm going to change it to programming on the main and program. And that's going to bring up the file for this locomotive. Now normally what I do, and anybody else who programs with GMRI will know that you go ahead and first thing you do with a new decoder is put it on the programming track and read in all the values. You can't do that when you're programming on the main like I just set it for. If you look back at in the lower right corner here, it says programming track, programming on the main, or edit only. Well, I have it set on programming on the main because A, I don't have a programming track set up at the moment, and B, if I set it to program, it would program all my locomotives if I wired it up to be my whole layout. So going back to the window for this, what I'm just going to do is show you the speed tables. Now for guys who haven't used GMRI before and you're going to use it in the future, if you notice right now everything is yellow. All these bars are highlighted are yellow. What that's telling me is I just opened JMRI, and JMRI doesn't really have any idea what the current value in that CV is. It's telling you what it thinks it's supposed to be last time you saved it, but it hasn't confirmed it because you didn't read or write to the decoder. So just to demonstrate something real quick, I'm going to go ahead and zero out every one of these speed steps. And then notice they changed orange from yellow to orange. What the orange is telling you now is that, hey, Chris, you made a change. So now, if I see anything in orange, that means I just changed it, and it needs to be written to the decoder if I want it to be saved. So I've basically made all 28 speed steps 0, and I'm going to show you something else way up here. You see where it says Use Table? You have to make sure you check that. I'm going to take the check mark out of it, or actually, if I go back to here where we had CVs 2, 5, and 6, you notice there's a little checkbox here. It says Use V Start, V Mid, and V High. If I click this, it's telling me I'm going to use these 3 CVs instead of using the speed table over here. You notice the check mark is gone now here. So you can only do one method or the other. You can either use CVs 2, 6, and 5, or you can use your speed table with all 28 CVs. So I'm going to go ahead and put the check mark back in here. If you go back to your tab here and look, now that one's unmarked. So now it's going to ignore these 3 settings, and it's going to use these settings. And just the opposite. If I click this, it's going to use these 3 settings, and it's going to ignore the speed table altogether. So I'll put the check mark back in here. I set these all to 0, and then the next thing you do is at the bottom here it says Write Changes on Sheet. So everything that's orange is going to be a change, and it's going to write that to the decoder as soon as I click it, which I'm going to do right now. Now you see they turn red momentarily, and then they turn white. Once they turn white, it says, okay, I know for sure that because I just wrote that to the decoder that that's the correct value. If for some reason, you saw how it turned red, if for some reason it sends the command to the decoder and the decoder doesn't acknowledge that it received it, it'll leave it red. It'll keep moving on, but any of them, if you see any that are highlighted red, that means it sent the command, but it knows that the command wasn't received. It's like if you yell upstairs to the wife and she doesn't answer back, you turn red. Okay, so if she answers back, everything's okay, and it turns white and it goes on to the next one. So, yeah. If I go, I know you can't see this right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and accelerate my locomotive, and I've gone all the way up to speed step 28, and it's not moving. And that's exactly right, because I told it not to. 0 volts on every one of these 28 speed steps means it's not going to move. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just run that one all the way up to the top. You notice I still have my 2 little check marks here because I want this to be a nice straight line from slowest to fastest. We'll tweak those later on when we start doing the individual speed steps, but for now, this gives me a pretty nice response. Now, once again, you see this one is 0, so it never changed, but the rest of them changed, so they're orange again. I'm going to go ahead and write changes on the sheet. And just that fast, I programmed 28 or 27 CVs. When the camera comes back on later, I'll show you what you got to do just to program 1 CV if you're doing it with your throttle. And to think about doing that 28 times and then do it over and over and over again, you could be here for days pressing buttons on your throttle trying to do what I just did in seconds with JMRI. And that's why a lot of guys go ahead and only use these 3 right here. If you're not using JMRI, this is a great way to do it. You only have to program 3 CVs, and you can end up with a nice chart in the long run that looks like this. You know, if I set this one to 0, this one to 122, and this one to 255, and when I say this one, I mean these 3 here. So if I went 0, 122, and 255, in a perfect world, that thing would accelerate nicely from 0 all the way up to top speed. But brings up an interesting little point when you look right here and see this 20 in the start voltage. Most of these locomotives, and the cheaper they are, usually the worse it is. You have to apply some voltage to get it to actually start. So 0 is a number you'll never see on there, or even a really low number, unless you're using back EMF and have a really good locomotive with a really good decoder. But that's a whole nother subject we won't get into right now. So here's back to our table. I'm going to go ahead and just run the locomotive real quick. Full speed through the speedometer. I have to reach over and turn it back on. If you let it sit for like 10 minutes, it's got an auto shut off. Then you just turn it off, turn it back on.
Hey, Chris, this is probably a good time to take a little sponsor intermission, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, I need to take a real quick intermission myself, so give me 2 minutes. I'll be right back.
All right. Just to let everybody remind everybody, all of our viewers that are watching, YouTube Model Builders website. It's YouTubeModelBuilders.com. You can go there for all the latest eMag, Hangouts, and live show. Anything to do with the schedules, times. Just to let everybody know, we do general Hangouts on Thursday nights, the same time as the Tuesdays. Johnny Reb is your host for that, and those are recorded now. So anybody that does not get to see that, they can go to the YouTube Model Builders YouTube page and view them there. So they are now recorded. They pick what they've been doing, I think, is they've been picking a topic when Johnny first comes on, and they stick with a certain topic for a little while, and then they, change the topics throughout the evening. Another thing I wanted to talk to everybody about is the big build contest. It's now, because I think that's been probably about 7 days since I saw that. The big build contest is hosted by Eric Hall from IMRROCOM. Go to his YouTube channel. He's got some video. I've posted a few videos on Google Plus community page to tell you how to do the contest and all that. Pretty good information. So everybody go to that to see some of the later stuff. really cool stuff going on in the YouTube Model Builders team right now. I know that JD is working really hard for this next issue of YouTube Model Builders eMag. So anyways, some really good stuff going on. Are you back, Chris?
Yep, I'm back.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so I'm actually just going to go ahead and, well, I'll run it through pretty quick. I want to switch over to show you guys the locomotive again, going through the throttle, or through the speedometer. But so I just ran that through, and it was 62 miles an hour in forward. On reverse, and this is at speed step 28, because remember I always set my top speed. There's 72 miles an hour, so it's obviously starting to warm up here quick. I'll go through one more time, 72 miles an hour. Okay, so it went through forward and backwards at 72. If I run it one more time and it's close, there we go, 73. That's close enough. That's telling me it's pretty warmed up now. So the first thing I need to accomplish is to get that top speed down to 56. I'm not going to worry about start voltage yet. I'm not going to worry about mid or anything in between. So if you look on, are you still seeing my speed table?
Yes.
Okay. So just from experience, I know that if I run this thing down somewhere, it usually ends up somewhere between 180, 190, sometimes a little lower, sometimes a little less. So is about what it takes to get me to 56 miles an hour on an average locomotive with an average decoder. So make that change and go ahead and write the changes. And just like that, in about 4 seconds, we programmed 27 CVs again. So I'm going to back this thing up. I have to wait and reset my speedometer again. I'm asleep. Okay, so 58 miles an hour through and forward. I'm pretty close already. And, oh, 65 in reverse. Okay. Probably because I didn't have, was pretty close to it. Maybe it wasn't quite up to full speed when I hit the speedometer. Yeah, there we go. 62 in forward, 65 in reverse.
There goes your mic again.
Oh, no. Wonder what's causing that.
I don't know. Did it change? Is it still on? Because you changed it back to the camera, the mic on the camera, and it fixed
Right.
it.
So it should still be there. But, let me see what. Here, quick. If there's some kind of interference going on and going off outside of the computer. Just any better?
No.
All right, switch back again. Any better now?
There you go.
Okay. I'll just switch back and forth and then it works. So, all right. So let's go through one more time, and we've got 63 miles an hour in reverse, and we had about the same going forward. So if you can see the window again, I'm going to just drop this down. Now we'll try about 174. It's just a guessing game, and the more you do this, the more educated your guesses will be. So right now, the whole process for me. Oh, you want to mute yours?
I know that when I'm doing the speed match and like you're doing, when I've got the exact same locomotive, the same motor, it's pretty precise. It's pretty easy. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got 3 locomotives that I set that graph to exactly where I wanted it, and they're perfect. I mean, they're so close to each other that I'm not even gonna, you know, you watch their knuckles and they're just perfect.
Yeah.
So
If you watch them and they're pulled tight all the time, then you know one is dragging or one is too fast. But you know they're right when you sit there and watch the knuckles just kind of open and close as they're putting along. And it can be a real thing of beauty. And the reason I've gotten so deep into this is because the layout I'm building, I'm going to be literally running prototype length trains with mid-train helper units, multiple mid-train helpers. And when you're running a really long train, and if those mid-train helpers aren't running in perfect tune with the head-end locomotives, you're going to string line your train in a real hurry, or push it off the edge or whatever. If the pushers are helping too hard, they're going to collapse the trains in the middle, so to speak, push it off the outside of a curve. Or if they're running too slow, they'll put way too much tension in and they'll string line over the inside of a corner. So I've been working on this to get them to run really nice, where I can run really long trains up and down my helix or around curves that right now are sharper than they're going to be when the layout is done, because on my old layout they're smaller radius than the new one I'm building. So it's real important when you run long trains. If you're just running two locomotives on the head end, they don't have to be matched that much. In fact, until it gets to the point where you hear wheels dragging, it's not a big deal. It'll start protesting when they're really off, but they don't have to be as precise as I'm making them if that's your situation, if you just want to run two together on the head end or something. It's just when you start talking about pushers or mid-train helpers or 3 or 4 locomotives together and one of them is just badly off, the other ones will more than compensate, but you'll hear those wheels dragging, or motors trying to chatter a little bit. It'll tell you real quick when it's not running good with the rest of them. So anyways, I just ran that through, and I was pretty close to being right on. I ran through at 56 miles an hour. I'm just going to run it through again to confirm that. No, I got 59 in reverse that time, but I did notice this is tending to run just a little faster in reverse than forward. So there's 57 in forward and 59 in reverse. So I'm just going to drop this down about 3 or 4. So now I'm at 170 from 70, and I'll write the changes on the sheet.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Now I notice on the column there on the bottom it says you can write the changes on the sheet or write the changes on all sheets. What's all that about?
Okay, so if you notice these tabs along the top, there's a lot more settings in these. These are all the CVs in your decoder for all the different things, from motor, lights, consisting, speed table, functions. If I hit, there's write changes on the sheet, and all that's going to do is only anything in orange will write. If I hit that right now, it won't do anything because you notice nothing is orange, nothing is changed. If I hit write full sheet, it's going to write every one of them, including the number 0 that's in yellow right now. It hasn't changed, but it's just going to automatically write everything on the sheet, including this one up here. It doesn't tell you what this one is, but this one is actually a part of CV29, which is your basic configuration CV. But if you notice where my mouse is right now going back and forth, you notice there's nothing there. If you had reverse trim, that's usually where it's going to be. It's sitting right here. So this decoder actually doesn't have reverse trim, but if that was there, it would also write that. Regardless of whether you change it, when you hit write full sheet, it writes everything on the sheet. Now, if I say write changes, which is the one underneath here that you can barely see, it says write changes on all sheets. That's going to literally, I could go on this sheet and I'm just going to hit that and hit it back. See how it turned orange? That's a change. All the ones in yellow are not. Then I could go into this one and change it, but then change it back so it doesn't actually change anything. So, you know, that one is orange. And if I go back to my speed table and I'm going to make one little tweak on here and bring this down a little bit. If I hit the right changes on all sheets, now it's going to write everything in on orange on this sheet, everything on orange on this sheet, and any other tabs that have anything in orange, that's what it's going to send out to the decoder now.
Oh.
And the last one is write all sheets. That one you want to use with care if you have sound locomotives or especially, you know, like QSI, Tsunami, or especially like the new WOW decoders. Because when I hit that, it's going to literally go to every one of these tabs and write every value, regardless of whether I changed it or not. And there's one tab here called CVs. This one is literally a summary of all the rest of these tabs. This is just actually the CV number in the column here. And here again, the color coding, yellow or orange, it changed, it didn't change. It was just written and it's okay. Or if it was red, it's not okay. And so here, if you just want to not have to look at every tab, just look at this one and scroll up and down. This is everything in a nutshell right here. You can even go ahead and just write them individually. If I hit, see this orange one, if I go ahead and hit write, it just wrote it. And if I went back to that tab where it was, it wouldn't be orange anymore, it'd be white. So that's just a little shortcut too for guys that have used Decoder Pro but maybe not fully to its full capability.
So depending on the actual decoder and the manufacturer of the decoder, or whether it's sound or not, that determines how many tabs you actually have on the top of the window there to use, right?
That's correct. There's a different decoder, they call them decoder definitions. So every decoder out there has its own definition depending on what CVs are in it and what the programming values are. So needless to say, your sound decoders have a whole lot more CVs than a non-sound decoder, and even from one brand to the next, from NCE to TCS or to Digitrax. Even in your basic decoders, the functions are all different, and how they program the CVs can even be different. Even though the results look the same when you run your train, when you scroll through these tabs, you know, and the way you do that is to go back to here, and you can. I'm actually not going to do it just yet, but if you remind me later on, we'll do this new local. And it'll actually bring up a list of all these different decoders you have to choose from. And you always want to try and pick the correct one or as close as you can, because you're either going to have, if you don't, you can't really hurt anything, but you may not be able, the decoder, let's say, has 50 CVs you can program, but if you grab the wrong definition, maybe only 40 of those CVs will show up in Decoder Pro. Or maybe there's going to be 80 of them in there, and you think, oh, wow, cool, I can go and adjust this. And then you go and adjust it, and it even says that it wrote it, but then you come to find out that CV doesn't even exist in your decoder, so all it did was send it off into space. You thought you wrote it, you thought it's all good, but it doesn't even exist on your decoder, you know what I mean? So, you know, needless to say, you want to put a round peg in a round hole and a square peg in a square hole. So, you know, you can get a round peg in a square hole, but that don't mean you're getting everything out of it that you could, you know. So yeah, you want to pick the right decoder definition if you can. Sometimes they're not there and you got to pick something close. Pick the same brand and pick a model number that's about the same, and you usually do okay. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and write the changes on this sheet. Ignore all the other ones.
You know, the only function that I wish you could print off some of that stuff.
Actually, you can. I think. Let's take a look here. It's been a while since I looked.
I've never tried, but I've.
See this up in the left corner?
Oh, I see that. Yeah.
File, and we'll just do the print preview. Now I can either preview it all or just the CVs, and let's just do CVs and see. It actually does show you a list. And it
I'll be
shows
darned.
And you know, the kind of the weird thing is, and it's just something about me that in the way I do this, I don't actually have a whole lot of value in keeping these records. I use Decoder Pro to program it, and once it's programmed, I don't lose a lot of sweat if I lose the file or overwrite the file, because most of the time when it comes to programming a decoder again, the first thing I do is throw it on the programming track and read from the decoder back into Decoder Pro again. I don't really care if it changes in Decoder Pro, because I'm not going to just blindly write what's in Decoder Pro. I'm going to go ahead and have the locomotive tell Decoder Pro what its current settings are, because a lot of times I tweak things when it's out on the layout. If I notice it's running good at low speed, but maybe it's running a little too fast, I might go ahead and just tweak a couple of those CVs manually on the layout, or I adjust momentum, or I adjust some sound functions or things like that. So most of the time when it comes to programming a locomotive that I've already programmed, the JMRI file is out of date compared to what's actually in the decoder. So as a matter of habit, I automatically, when it comes back to putting it in JMRI, I just go ahead and read it all back in first thing before I do any programming. So I don't really care if I lose it. I'm not going to print it, save a copy, because I'm never going to go back and use that again.
Okay, Chris, I got a question for you. You said that when it's out there on the layout, and if the locomotive's not, you know, you're going to tweak it a little bit why it's on the layout. How do you do that? Because I have tried to change CVs on the regular layout with all the other locomotives on there, and it doesn't work out very good.
What system are you running?
I'm running Digitrax.
Okay, it's going to be hard for me to speak to that because I don't run that myself, but I know with NCE, and I'm just going to switch cameras here real quick and show you.
That's ops mode programming, right? Where you program not on a programming track, and only some CVs are programmable. Is that what am I understanding that correctly? What I read about that? Yes,
you're absolutely right. It's called ops mode or programming on the main, and I got the wrong camera showing here. What's going on?
Can JMRI not write in ops mode at all? Do you have to use the DCC system to do that, or does JMRI support ops mode programming as well?
Yeah, if you recall earlier, I kind of showed you where it said programming track, programming on the main, or edit only.
Right, right.
So programming track will literally send it only to your programming track. Programming on the main sends it out to the entire layout, but only to the decoder that has that address. And
sure.
I program on the main all the time, and I've never had any issues. So, dude, to answer your question, let me try and do this without.
The reason why I asked that question is you had all your locomotives on 3 different tracks there, and you took them all off the track so you could program that one loco. So
yeah,
that's what it was.
Yeah, no. If you look to the right here, there's all kinds of them on the layout that I didn't remove. I was just kind of getting them out of the way for the what I was doing. I was going to end up putting them back on the other track. In fact, while you were at break, I went and put that one back on the same track and moved it out of the way. So all I got to do is roll it up when we're done.
There's your mic again.
Yeah.
Oh, now. I wonder if I got a bad wire in this camera. Tell me if it gets better at all.
Not yet.
I'm just going to keep talking. And
yeah, maybe there.
All right, otherwise let me just try.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, you're fine.
You're good now.
Okay. So all I have to do is hit a button down here. And now it's asking, and then I hit another button. Or it says program local on the main when I hit this button down here. I go ahead and hit enter. And now it says program local, and it's by default, it's got the number of the local that I last had selected, which is the one we're working with. So I'll just hit enter, and now has all different options for programming. Let me get this better, get the glare off there. If
Well,
I hit
that's
one, I can just, I've got all kinds of things I can program right from my cab now, and it's programming on the main with all the rest of the layout, locos on the layout. It's only going to program that one decoder. So, and it's super easy. I do it all the time. I've never had an issue of cross-contamination, if you will, that some other locomotive, unless it's programmed to that same address, it's just not going to get screwed up.
See, and that's what's always weird to me, because you hear guys talking about a program track all the time, and it's like, well, what is the necessary need of a program track if you can program? Because Digitrax will allow you to program on the main line, and it won't. What's the? I mean, why do the decoders have addresses if you can't just program that one address locomotive on the track? Because I mean, I've ran into problems in the past of I go to default a locomotive and it defaults every locomotive on the whole track.
Yeah. Well, so the difference between programming a programming track and programming on the main, there's basically two main differences. One of them being that when you're programming on the programming track, it's a two-way conversation between whatever you're programming with, whether it's your cab or your JMRI, and the decoder. So the programmer talks to the decoder acknowledges and says, yeah, I got it, and sends it back. Okay, so it's a two-way conversation. You can't do that with programming on the main, because every one of those decoders would respond. It's on the programming track, it has no idea what the address is, and it doesn't care. If you would hook up your programming track wires to your main line and did programming on the programming track, you would program every one of your decoders.
So the difference is that you can read from the programming track, but you can only write to the main line. That makes sense.
Exactly, because when it's programming to the main line, it's saying, hey, number 211, change this CV. And number 211, if it's on the track, we'll hear that and we'll do that. It's the same as sending a throttle command or a turn on the lights command. It'll hear it, it'll do it, but it doesn't talk back, it doesn't tell you, and the command station doesn't wait for an acknowledgement. So it's kind of a shot in the dark. If it's on the track and the track is clean, you send the command, it'll probably get it. And you'll know because it'll do that little twitch, like they always do. But yeah, it's a one-way conversation. It's just the command station or JMRI going out over your whole layout and hoping that it's out there and hoping that it does what it says. Where on the programming track, it's a two-way conversation. You can read what's in the decoder back into JMRI or back into your cab, or your throttle, however you're programming. And the other difference with the programming track, and this is why they actually invented it in the first place, is it's a much lower voltage. I know some of you guys have probably heard where, oh, hey, I'm trying to program a sound locomotives, particularly tsunamis, and it just isn't working on my programming track. Well, that's because the voltage is turned way down on the programming track so that you don't fry a decoder. That's why you always, when you do a brand new decoder install, don't go throw it on the layout, throw it on your programming track, because if you miswired something, or even if it was a factory miswire, say you bought it already with a decoder installed, throw it on the programming track, and if something is wrong, you'll know it immediately and you won't fry your decoder because there's not enough voltage there to fry it. So it's a safety factor too, and the problem is the voltage is so low that tsunamis don't respond because there's not enough voltage. So that's why you have to buy those programming track boosters or power packs, whatever they call them, for tsunamis. Now the newer command stations from most brands now have enough power to handle sound decoders, but it's not full track voltage. It's turned way down to prevent damage to decoders if something is wired wrong. So when
you have JMRI clicked to program on mainline. It's only going to program anything to do with that one locomotive.
Right. It's really no different, like I said, than sending a throttle command or a turn the lights on command or a turn the bell on if it's a sound. But it's just telling it to change the value of that CV. And yeah, so that's why only that locomotive responds. The same as when you send a throttle command, only that locomotive responds and not everyone on the layout. But the drawback is you can't read it back, and if you throw a brand new locomotive on the layout, well, that don't matter whether you're programming or not. You throw a brand new decoder on there that was wired wrong, you throw it on full track voltage right away, you're gonna let the smoke out. No doubt. So
Can you program on the fly?
oh, absolutely. When you're programming on the main, that's one of the cool things about programming on the main. In fact, I'll try and show you that right now. I'm gonna have a hard time showing you the throttle on that, so you're gonna have to take my word for it. But let me do something real quick to.
No
I'm
longer
gonna turn. I'm gonna turn all the
programming to turn volumes down on the fly.
Sure. So what I'm gonna do is I took my speed table and I knocked speed step 28 way down so that it's not going to run very fast at all at full speed. And then I'll be able to show you using my throttle. In fact, you can probably see it twitching now. It's programming the CVs. And let me switch back to my camera so I can see what I'm showing you. There it is. Okay. So I'm going to run this thing up to speed step 28. You see it's not moving very fast at all. And while it's doing that, I'm going to get on my throttle and I'm going to say program on the main, that locomotive. I'm going to program a CV, so I just hit number 2. Which CV do I want to hit? Number 94, because that's speed step 28. And notice it says value 0 because it can't read it. It's getting out of our sight as we do this. But if I go ahead and just jack this all the way up to 255, you should see that thing launch. And go ahead and enter. Oops. Well, I guess it didn't. Maybe I hit the wrong CV. All right, let me try it one more time. Let's make sure I got the right CV. Step 28. It doesn't tell me which CV it is, though. Oh well. But yeah, you can do, if you had a sound unit on there and you put the bell on and it's ringing, ding, 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 and you go ahead and while it's doing that, you can make the adjustments and it'll actually lower the volume even while it's playing. So I thought theoretically you can do the same thing with speed, but for some reason it didn't respond. It's a good question, though. I'm gonna play around with that and let you know how it turns out later on. So anyways, just gonna get back and I guess if you guys want to watch me grind through trying to get this thing all speed matched, or just take my word for it that at the end of the day, just by using my JMR speed tables and setting, I don't literally do every step one at a time. I set the top end, then I set the bottom end, being my start speed. Then I set somewhere around CV14. Usually I take CV14. And when that runs at 28 miles an hour, I usually have a nice, in fact, I'm going to show you the table for that because this will help you guys out. You don't have, I feel it's important because I don't want you to think I have to sit here and program every one of these 28 speed steps. So I'm going to turn my sharing back on real quick and so right now those are all orange. I had just made that change. I'm going to go ahead and write those. And this is how I simulate. You can simulate using CVs 2, 5, and 6 using your speed table. You remember I put a check mark on the right and a check mark on the left? And you guys are seeing this table, right? I want to make sure that.
Yes, we are.
Okay. So right in the middle here is speed step 14. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a check mark in that one too. So that's your middle speed step. So on the left you got your low, and 14 is your middle, and then 28 is your high. These check marks are like anchor points. Remember you watching me run that up and down before? Well, that really applies between any two check marks. So watch what happens now. If I drop this one, you see how it's anchored to 14 now instead of 0? If I bring up 14, so this can literally make, it's a I call it a 3-point speed table. So I got a perfectly straight line between 1 and 14 and a perfectly straight line between 14 and 28. But the two lines aren't necessarily the same, see? So I set 28 to my top speed of 56. I go back and I actually, this is just something I do myself. I don't recommend you don't have to do it if you don't want, but ever since I started getting sound locomotives, I leave speed step 1 set to 0 because I don't want the locomotive to move on speed step 1, but I want the prime mover to spool up. So I leave 1 set to 0, and then I make speed step number 2 my starting speed step. So now see how I kind of goobered everything up by grabbing that and moving it without having a check mark there? So you can just go ahead and clean that up real quick and easy by doing this. Put my check mark back in at 14. And what I need to do is put the check mark here at 1 instead of at 0, because 1 is, or speed step 2 is actually where I want my locomotive to start moving. So now you can see I can kind of rubber band this thing up and down in the middle. So set the top speed, set the bottom speed on speed step 2, and then when I'm done I come back and I set the middle speed of 14, or speed step 14, I set that to 28 miles an hour, and generally that's all I need to do for the most part. I find that doing a 3-point speed step like that, which is an exact simulation of doing it this way with CVs 2, 6, and 5, for the most part is really good. If I have any trouble with the locomotive at all, or if I'm bored and I have nothing better to do, then I start going and checking like every 4th speed step. So if it runs good at 14 and it runs good at 28, then I'll go ahead and check like speed step 8. And most of the time, sure enough, it's going to be right at 16 miles an hour where it should be. If I ever have any trouble, it's right down here in the low end, because most of the decoders have some kind of they call it dither, I think, for Digitrax, and then they call it something else for NCE, but it's torque compensation or something like that. What it does is it gives little pulses to the motor on the low speed steps, and then it fades out. It gets the motor to start moving past its initial bind, and then it kind of backs off. Kickstart, that's the other one I was trying to think of. You probably heard that term, kickstart, for your decoders, but generally the kickstart is worst on the first couple speed steps, and then it fades out. So sometimes I may end up with a little bit of a jiggity-jaggedy looking speed curve down here on these first couple steps, but generally by the time you get out to around 8 or 9 and then through the rest of the curve, it's pretty straight, unless you really have a hosed up locomotive that's got sticky old grease and worn bearings, or a sticking thrust washer or something, you know what I mean? It's if it's a good running locomotive, it'll tend to have a really nice straight curve, and generally just a couple spots along the way I spot check, and if they're good, that's good enough. And then when it comes time to consisting it with another locomotive, then you'll end up maybe tweaking it a little if you have to, if for some reason it doesn't run good. So literally I can knock out a locomotive in 10 minutes or less of speed match, get it set up to where I want it to run with the rest of them. And that includes waiting for my computer to start up. So it's really pretty much that easy, unless you have a problem child locomotive. Let me switch back to the camera and show you some of the consists that are the ones I have already speed matched. And then, is it that late already? Or somebody's, oh, 10:40, okay. Heard somebody's chime going off there. That's 11 already? All right, what am I doing here? There we go. Hopefully don't try not to jolt this too hard and have my mic go bad again. So, right here is a couple consists that I have set up. Most of these have sound in them. I'm going to start it moving before the sound even comes on, just to wake them up. So while that one wakes up, I'll go and select the address for the other one over there. All right, so I'm going to start that consist moving. That's at speed step 3 right now. And of course these haven't been warmed up yet, so now the other one's coming along at speed step 3 also. Okay. Now this one here, 250, is a problem child. It's actually got a bad order written for it. I got the front truck has got intermittent pickup problems, so it occasionally stalls on turnouts. So I actually sped up this other one because I just want to get it up close. Now, just going to speed them up so you don't have to watch them creep. And I'm going to show you something that's how well these things actually run once you get them set nicely. So I just ran them in off the engine tracks, and I will run them back down the main here. So I brought one in, and I'm bringing in the other one, and I'm going to, one way I like to test them when I've got nothing better to do is, whoops, wrong throttle. What I'll do is I'll literally disconnect them, leave an inch or two in between them. And like I said, that 250 I know is going to be a problem because it's having intermittent electrical problems. And I'm just going to quickly consist all 4 of those together. It'll take me about 10 seconds here. And, no, I'm sorry, I blew that, so that's going to take a little longer than I hit the wrong buttons. I'm just going to completely clear both consists and rebuild a new one. I was going to do an old style consist for lead. That's another subject I'd like to talk to you guys about, but that's a whole subject unto itself. But if you guys are interested in consisting and want me to do a clinic on that, I'd be more than happy to. So, all right, so set up new style. We'll make 372 as the lead locomotive, and it's forward. 250 will be the rear locomotive, and that's reversed. And then 371 is a mid locomotive, and that's reversed. And then 262 is a mid locomotive, and that's forward. So I'm just going to space these out a little bit. And okay, here's, see if we can get that speed step 1. Trying to get the glare right so you can read that without blocking the locomotives. Notice they all spooled up. but to notch 1, but they didn't move. Now I'm going to go ahead and make it speed step 2. It looks like 371 didn't quite start as good as the rest of them did, but oh, I bet you I got momentum. I forgot to turn the momentum off on them. That's what it is. What I do is once I have them consistent, I'll actually set them back up with momentum so that they run nicely. It's just you want to turn it off for speed matching. So you can see they kind of pretty much move all exactly at the same time. This one is just delaying a hair for some reason on startup. But
When you have them speed match, does the momentum match the acceleration curve momentum? Does it naturally match, or is there a separate curve that has to be built for momentum?
I do believe between decoder brands that can be different. The amount of momentum is set with CVs 3 and 4, but if I set CV3 to a value of, let's say, 5 on an NCE, I don't know, I can't guarantee you that it's the same if I set it to 5 with a TCS or a Tsunami or any other decoder, Digitrax.
And I didn't see a place I haven't seen a place in MRI where you can build like a momentum curve the way you can a speed table.
No, you can't. All you can do is, it's only commanded by those 2 CVs, one for acceleration and one for B. You'd have to have a whole bunch of CVs, like a speed table, in order to do that. So, like I said, I don't know, and I think I read somewhere that like Digitrax is a little different than, say, NCE in how much it responds at a certain value. That's all programmed. That's up to the manufacturer, you know. And I haven't really seen any real issues. I don't put a lot of momentum in. I usually only put just a little bit so that it doesn't jump when you start. And you know, I don't put in so much that you'd see a noticeable difference. But one of the reasons I do that is when you're consisting, this is something to keep in mind. Like my number 250 right here that's having pickup issues right now on the front truck. If it stalls and you have a whole ton of momentum put in there, it's going to drag until it comes all the way back up to speed. You know, let's say you're clipping along at full speed and it took 10 seconds to get up to full speed. Well, if that thing loses power for a second, it's going to take 10 seconds for it to get back up to full speed. So for 10 seconds, it's going to be dragging. Now, if it's part of a 3 or 4 unit consist, it's no big deal. You might flat spot your wheels a little bit, but if you had, say, 1 pusher on the back end, you got 2 on the head end, and you got a pusher on the rear end of maybe a 30-car train. If that pusher is the one that stalls even momentarily and then takes 10 seconds to get back up to speed, oh boy, you're going to have a mess. That's where you're either going to bust knuckles or you're going to have cars laying on the side of on their sides, one or the other. So
right, emergency stop skips over momentum though, right? So if you did have that set up and you had that kind of problem, you could hit emergency stop and it would skip momentum.
Sure, but you're not going to know you have that problem until they're falling off the track. So
Yeah.
That's a little late to hit it then. But so I usually run on. I don't know what the actual numeric value is, but on the NCE, you see this momentum button is right under my finger.
Yeah.
And if I hit that button, it's giving me the option of 0 through 9, with 9 being the most momentum and 0 being none.
Right.
I usually just run it at like 1 or 2. So I'm going to hit 2. You see they all programmed. And now they're going to just briefly hesitate from the time I hit the button. If you watch when I hit the button to when they actually stop. Hit the button, they didn't go till now. So that's about all the momentum I put in them. And I started with by jumping right to speed step 4, but if I do it 1 step at a time, it's actually a nice smooth start. Now you're not slamming to a start and you're not slamming to a stop.
Right.
If I do it 1 step, okay, that's 2, speed step 2, speed step 3. You know, you don't see it jerk to the next speed step. It's just
smooths it out just enough, and yet I won't have any real issues if one of them stalls for any reason, and then regains.
I just may run less momentum then, which we find that problem. A little bit of momentum makes your operators slow down and do things more intentionally than just zipping around like a slot car track. But I can see your point in not running a lot of momentum.
Now, if you go ahead and start putting in the capacitors, the keep alives, or whatever you want to call them.
Yes, absolutely.
If you do that, then you definitely could run as much momentum as you want. I only have one right now. I just bought one of the new TCS Wow Sound diesel decoders, and it came with that keep alive. Oh my gosh, that's unbelievable. I have never used any of those before. You pick the thing up, you have it running at full speed. You pick it up and set it down on the layout, and it'll move a little while, and or if it's not moving at all, the sound will run for like 15, 20 seconds after you take it off the layout.
Yeah, I think the keep alive are a no-brainer. And they're cheap now too. So I plan on adding keep alive to all my equipment over time.
If you have, the bigger your layout is, the more it makes sense. And the reason I say this is a little off subject, but I was thinking, instead of powering your frogs, if you think about how much money it costs you to power a frog.
Yep.
Versus just, if I've got 50 turnouts, that's where I'm saying the bigger the layout, the more it's going to cost you if you're going to power your frogs. Versus if I buy 20 keep alives at $20 a piece, or I buy 50 or 25 to 50 hex frog juicers or dual frog juicers or whatever you want to use to power yours, I'm thinking you'd probably be cheaper off to put keep alives in your locomotives than it would be to power your frogs.
Yeah, that's what Joe Fugate,
honest.
our hobbyist, he had come to the decision that it was cheaper to buy keep alives than powering your frog. But not only is it cheaper, but you get all the side benefits of momentum working better and getting away with dirtier track, and there's so many.
Absolutely. Yeah, it just makes sense, and I can see where he probably came to that same conclusion because he's got a big layout, and I've been seriously thinking about it ever since playing around with that one. Now it's just phenomenal. That's all I can say. I won't install another decoder without it. They're kind of pricey, but
and I'm going to go back and add them to everything, and I am not powering a single frog on my layout for the same reason. It just makes the most sense, and they're just not that expensive to buy.
Yeah, and even if it wasn't money, anybody who's ever powered a frog will tell you there's nothing fun about it. It's extra wiring. It's a ton of extra wiring. It's extra hardware. It's extra software components. However you choose to do it, it's a pain. There's nothing easy about it. So,
especially in your case where you have at least some manual turnouts, that adds to the complexity too. If you already have tortoises on everything, you've already got, or even servos, you've already got the electrical contacts for frog powering. But if you have manual turnouts like with the Caboose Industries or anything else type of ground throws, you have to add that capability. So, and handling track, you have to plan that into your track work to be able to power the frog. And I'm just not doing it. I will not be powering any frogs.
Yeah, that's so. Any of you guys, I guess, is there anything you guys want to see from this point? I was going to sit here and speed match a bunch. If you want to see that, it can get kind of boring, and I don't want to bore you to tears sitting here watching you set every.
Our time's coming to the end too.
So if anybody has any specific questions that we haven't talked about, or a little elaboration on something we did, I'd be more than happy to answer it. But otherwise, I think we'll make that good, and appreciate everybody who came in to watch, and I hope there were a bunch watching out on YouTube. And
well, I want to thank you for coming in and doing this presentation, and I'll definitely imagine one of us will hit you up. Maybe Troy will want to hit you up on the other one that you're talking about, consisting.
Yeah, because that's the other half of this equation. It's you speed match so that you can consist, but that's another whole subject unto itself that really isn't even speed matching. All the ins and outs of what works and what doesn't, especially the more locomotives you try to run at a time. And so
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot to it. But JMI seems like it makes the whole process really easy to go ahead and be able to speed match.
Yeah, it really does. Between the speedometer and JMRI, I mean, oh,
Yeah, you
if I could take back the hundreds of hours I spent manually doing it before, getting JMRI and before getting a speedometer. Even with JMRI before I did that for a couple of years before I even got the speedometer. And if I could wind back the clock, that'd be the first thing I bought.
yeah, you sold me.
Before I ever tried to.
You've definitely sold me on buying a speedometer for speed matching purposes, no question about it. That's a no-brainer. That's a very, very cheap thing that will save you many, many hours. And then when it comes to speed matching, if you didn't use JMRI for anything else, if you don't use it to control your layout, if you're not interested in it for any of those other things, just doing speed table curves is worth the intellectual investment of learning JMRI.
Absolutely.
I would encourage anybody, if you do nothing else with JMRI, use it to program speed curves.
Yeah, I can't argue with that because it's really a blessing. It really allows you to take it to the next level. There's simple speed matching, which is okay for 2 or even sometimes 3 locomotives together if they're all just on the head end. But as soon as you want to start, like I say, putting mid-train helpers or pushers, either you got 2 choices. One is to trust your operators and control them separately, or number 2 is to just get them matched really nicely. And it's just so quick and easy this way. I can program 28 speed steps and get every one to an exact mile an hour faster than I can do 2 of them eyeballed.
Oh yeah.
I can do 2 of them every single speed step to a particular mile per hour in half the time, to just take 2 of them and eyeball them together and have them run halfway decent instead of perfectly.
And I've been looking at the speedometers that speak to JMRI. There's a couple different ways to do that with sensors, or that Valari or something like that brand that speaks back to JMRI. But after watching your use of the AccuTrack, I just don't think it's necessary, or could I justify spending the extra money? And the benefit of being able to throw the AccuTrack down anywhere that you happen to be able to flip your laptop open at is pretty valuable. I'm pretty.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't buy stock in AccuTrack before I started telling people about it, because I'm probably personally responsible for at least 50 of them to this point, and after tonight, probably a whole lot more.
Absolutely.
I did a clinic at a hobby shop in a town about an hour away, and the guy went ahead and stocked them and sold a dozen within a week after my clinic. He went and found them and added them to his inventory, and within a week after he got them in, he sold over a dozen to people that had been at my clinic. So.
Well, they're just so easy to use. By comparison, setting up the sensors for the integrated to JMRI speed matching system, that seems a really complicated mess. And with the AccuTrack, you just throw it down there and you can glance at it and get all the value you need out of it. So it's I just don't think that the extra effort and the about 4 or 5 times the cost is probably worth it.
And I think it's so neat that I'm able to know, and I can tell my operators, hey, I've got a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. They know that they can't exceed speed step 7 on here because that's 14 miles an hour. They literally know how fast they're going by their throttle setting. And you can do the same with Digitrax too. Digitrax works just a little bit different. From what I've seen, their throttles go like 0 to 99. So they're basically doing 100 steps, if you will. But you could take the same principle I did and apply it to your Digitrax, so that at speed step 50, it's running half of the speed you want it to go.
Oh yeah, you can. Yep.
Then you could have really interesting operational things, like have a speed restriction on a curve or a particular section of track where you have a speed restriction of 25 miles an hour or 15 miles an hour. I see a lot of operational interest in being able to know the speed of the train you're operating.
Absolutely, and that's it's just kind of something I developed, and I got guys in this area are doing it now, even like I say with Digitrax. So hopefully it'll spread and become something that everybody does. But it's you take the 2 of them. Well, and the key is this bad boy right here, because I know
what that is, then I know what this is, and there you go. I mean, it's without this, you'd never know. You're just guessing.
And with back EMF, even with a load, the train would have effectively still matched the correct speed, even with a load of cars, because back EMF would cause it to maintain the correct speed.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If you want, I could even show you a demonstration of that. That's a good point that I didn't bring up, but let me just run this consist through here and get it out of the way, and we'll go ahead and set
Yeah, I
up the
think
tunnel.
back EMF's amazing anyway.
I'm going to run the rest of those around the corner. It'll just take a second here, and then actually I'll just run them into the side of them over here.
When I do a Google search for AccuTrack 2 speedometer or AccuTrack speedometer, I'm not coming up with very good luck on trying to find deals.
Did you see he pasted a link in the chat? He pasted a link for where he bought it from. It was like $65 or something. That's about the best price I've seen.
Well, I wanted to search and see what the best deal I could find. That's why I'm asking if there was a brand name other than AccuTrack. Is it made by a different company or?
No, that's the only. There is an AccuTrack 2 now that's taller. It's like this much taller that you can literally run. If you want to run rolling stock through it, you can run your high wides through it, or auto racks or anything else that's over height, the maximum height cars. Like if I ran it, I couldn't run an auto rack through this one probably without. It might be close, but they actually made one that's about an inch or taller. Now they call it the AccuTrack 2.
Can you still buy the original model? Because I don't have any reason to buy the taller one.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Can you just put it up on blocks?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that too if you wanted to, but personally, I wouldn't have it out on my layout. I guess you could if you really wanted guys to get used to a speed at an op session, but I don't like to put anything on the layout that detracts from the railroad. That's something that doesn't belong on the layout in an op session because it's totally unprototypical. That's just me because I enjoy the prototypical part. I'm not saying that's a bad thing for other people, but you notice on my fascia there's nothing. There's not going to be any control levers. There's not going to be any car card boxes. There's not going to be anything. But I just like a clean, nothing but railroad layout when I'm running trains. So, but that's just me.
Mine too. I was thinking about putting my AccuTrack as you enter and exit staging, so that it would, and then I could always throw it on the layout if I was, doing other things like programming. But as a pseudo permanent place, I think I may just put mine as you enter and exit staging where it's not anything.
So if you see that one, I hope I didn't wreck the sound now again.
No, you're okay.
All right. So I'm just gonna lower that down enough, or move this somewhere where you can see it. How did we get to so far away here? I can't see it. All right, so I'm going to run this locomotive through at speed step 8, and it should say 16 if I have this thing set up right.
Give or take a mile an hour, sure.
And there it is. So, and if I run through at speed step 4, it should be 8 miles an hour. So here's speed step 4, 7.1. Okay, so we're lagging a little on that end. I'm going to run them back through and throw a switch that I forgot to do. Now I'm going to go pick up a cut of cars, and we're going to run it through on speed step 8, and you're going to see that with back EMF, this is still going to run it still should run at 16 miles an hour, even with a cut of cars on it. Now if I try to do the same thing with my NCE decoders that do not have back EMF, you're going to see a substantial reduction in speed.
Yeah. Can you control back EMF, or is it a simple on-off? Can you set the curve on it that way? That way, it's the effect of having to run a locomotive harder to climb a grade.
Right. So here's Speed step 8. 17. Yeah, we're actually going faster. You know why? Because the back EMF is
Overcompensating.
overcompensating just a hair. Exactly. It knows it's got a load, so it's actually, you know, applying more voltage to the point where it actually went a mile an hour faster than it would have been with no load.
Yeah, that's a substantial load that you put on that single locomotive too. So
as you can see, that's not a shortcut of cars. That's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 or so cars.
Yep.
And now if I'm going to turn around and run this at speed step 4 again. Remember we were at 7.1 miles an hour. 7.2. Actually, I don't even know how it's reading that, because unless that gap in there was enough gap between the cars, you know.
I was curious if it only read the first edge of the car. So it hit the first edge of the first car that you put through.
Actually, yeah, you're right. It's hitting the first edge, right.
And then it can't update again.
So coming through this way, there's a sensor right here.
Yep.
And a sensor on the opposite side. So it's a make-break. It's just a light and a reflector. Once it's through, you'll see there's a little white reflector on the back side.
Yeah.
It's just throwing a little infrared light. So yeah, it's break, and hover long between the two brakes.
So
but as you can see, there were 7.2 miles an hour, yet was just about exactly where we were without the load. So we were at 7.1.
But the way that things works, you couldn't speed up or slow down right now, and it actually tracks the speed. It only tracks it upon entering the AccuTrack.
Right.
Yep.
But you notice it didn't go off this time. It'll stay on until it's done sensing something. Now that the locomotive cleared, now it reset. You notice it didn't reset the entire time that train crew went through. So I'm going to pull this guy, and just to show you real quick, let me bring in that other one that I didn't even speed match, but doesn't matter. We'll just see whatever mile an hour. This one is an NCE decoder.
No back EMF. Right.
No back EMF.
What was the decoder that you had in that rail link locomotive?
That was a factory installed Tsunami from Walters Proto. Oh, I'm on the wrong track. I thought I was going to come in on this track here. All right, so here's speed step 8. Yeah, we got, whoops, you guys didn't see that, 9.5 miles an hour. So I'm just going to grab the cut of cars there. Same cut that we pulled with the other one. And here's speed step 8 again. Actually, you know what? I think this one is it. This one might actually be a...
No, it's low.
Yeah, that's only 7.6 miles an hour. It should be 16. Well, no, what did we have before?
9.5.
9.5, okay.
Talked about 2 miles an hour with the load.
Yeah. I'm just going to double check.
And I like the idea of some back EMF, but I think I like the idea of reducing the back EMF so that the load does create a... But then you can't use the speedometer capability with the speed type.
Exactly. That's one of the knocks on back EMF that some guys have. They say, well, you know, prototypically, if I'm going to go up a hill with a heavy load, I'm going to slow down.
Right.
So I've chosen, I agree with that theory, but by the same token, there's more value in knowing my speed than there is, because I can literally just slow down my throttle to simulate. And that's where I really love about the new WOW decoders with their auto notching.
Uh-huh.
You know, if I'm pulling a heavy load up the hill, the last thing I want to do is slow down my throttle with a Tsunami, because that's going to ramp the sound down when you really would be notching up, not notching down.
Right.
So your sound isn't really going to be right either. You know, but the auto notching on the WOW decoders literally senses the load and just simulates the real thing. The more load, the more it's going to notch up.
Right.
It's not speed dependent. it's totally load dependent and not speed dependent.
Right. It lets you climb a hill at 10 miles an hour in notch 8, just absolutely screaming.
Which is exactly what I need on my 2.2% grade with, on the Mullen Pass that I'm building.
Yep, I've got the same situation. I've got a heavy grade and long coal trains, and I want them to be. I want the sound to really scream.
Yeah. So that's. I don't know. Are we still live, dude, or did we wrap it?
Nope, I haven't ended it yet, but I'm getting ready to.
Yep.
I just need to do my end credits.
All right. Well, I'll let you do that, and
Thanks, Chris.
I've got a doggy bothering me to take a run, so.
Well, I want to thank
All
Chris
right.
for coming on tonight, and I want to make sure everybody remembers YouTube Model Builders Big Build Contest. Once again, Eric from MRRO.com is the host of that. It ends in September. I think we got up to 21, probably more than that, I would say by now. And then, of course, the YouTubeModelBuilders.com. Go there for all of your latest information, anything to do with the eMag, the latest subscriptions for that. The Hangout presentations. There's 4 of us that are doing that, 1 a month now. And then Thursday night hangouts with Johnny Reb. Thursday nights is more of a general. They bring up a certain topic. And then the monthly live show. Once again, you go to YouTubeModelBuilders.com for all the latest information on that. The Tuesday night presentations, of course, and the Thursdays. And then want to thank William, Graham, and Barry for taking over Mike's spot in the live show. Mike has stepped out with some family issues right now. And so other than that, I think it was a pretty good show. I want to thank Chris again for coming out and doing the show for us, for the presentation. It was all good.
Yeah. And I want to thank you guys all for watching. And if you have any questions, I'm on Google Plus and on YouTube with the MRL Trains as my handle. Just drop me a message and I'll answer any questions you got. So,
until the next
appreciate
time.
you listening. Hope I didn't bore you to tears.
Until the next time, we'll be seeing you. Just to let everybody know, the next Tuesday will be the Barry and Mike show. So until next month, thank you very much.